Most people think digital problems happen suddenly. A hack, a crash, a major failure.
But most digital systems don't collapse overnight. They drift slowly out of alignment, becoming fragmented, neglected, and increasingly difficult to govern.
Accounts multiply. Automation expands. Platforms evolve faster than human attention can keep up.
And somewhere in that quiet accumulation, people lose visibility, control, and operational clarity.
This is where digital stewardship begins.
Not as optimization, not as productivity culture, but as the ongoing responsibility of managing the systems we now depend on every day.
Because the future doesn't belong to unmanaged systems.
It belongs to the people willing to steward them intentionally.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that idea of quiet accumulation is exactly the trap so many fall into, especially when you're managing complex tech stacks. I mean, we are living in a reality where the internet evolved just exponentially faster than our human capacity to adapt to it.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer volume is staggering.
Right. And the result is that most people, even, those running really sophisticated cloud operations, they don't actually have a deliberate digital strategy. What they have is just, well, accumulated digital behavior kind of masquerading as a strategy.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the stark mechanical difference between deliberate strategy and mere behavior. Because accumulated behavior is purely reactive. It's totally circumstantial.
We're putting out fires.
Exactly. It's, granting a third-party application access to your core database because you needed it to run a single analytics report like 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And then you just never revoke the token. You make these tiny, isolated, high-friction decisions in the moment. And over time, this unmanaged behavior turns into digital entropy.
Wow. Digital entropy.
Yeah, the coherence of your system doesn't just vanish instantly. It degrades through 1,000 unmapped dependencies. It's this gradual loss of control that compounds quietly right beneath the surface of your daily operations.
It's like a digital version of rust. The bridge doesn't just snap one day. It rusts quietly until it can't hold its own weight. We have this misconception that digital neglect will, fail loudly.
Right, with blaring sirens and...
Massive server downtime, yeah. Dramatic error screens. But it rarely does. It accumulates at the very edges of our networks, completely unnoticed.
Well, it's actually slightly more insidious than physical rust, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because digital entropy actively masks itself as functionality.
Wait, how so?
Because trust and coherence degrade long before the systems actually return a 404 error. That slow erosion is the real danger. It's the small inconsistencies, like an unpatched legacy server environment that's still perfectly connected to an active API routing system.
Or an orphaned admin account for a developer who left the company like 18 months ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And these aren't just messy, they harden to massive systemic risks. The vulnerabilities widen completely silently. So by the time you get a sudden visible collapse, well, the structural integrity of your system has been hollowed out for years.
When was the last time you actually audited your digital footprint? Or are you just quietly accumulating accounts? Let us know in the comments below, because honestly, it's terrifying how easy it is to let high-level access gather digital dust.
It really is. And since these systems degrade with no outward warning signs, we have to fundamentally shift our operational mindset.
We have to be proactive.
Right. We have to move away from this passive existence of simply, maintaining presence to active governance. That is the true functional definition of digital stewardship. It is the intentional, ongoing management of your digital presence.
Okay, so it's not just a one-off cleanup.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I need to emphasize the timeline here. This is not a quarterly audit. It is a continuous living responsibility baked into how you interact with technology across 4 main areas.
And those are?
Systems, which is how your tools connect. Identity, ensuring your appearance and protocols are consistent. Security, meaning who actually has access. And trust, which is about long-term integrity. It is definitely not optimizing for vanity metrics.
Wait, so having a massive automated social media footprint isn't being in control. It sounds like we're building mansions on rented land where the landlord can change the locks at any second.
That is a perfect way to put it. Deploying massive scale across multiple platforms is merely an act of presence, is not an act of ownership.
Yeah.
And presence without stewardship immediately becomes dependency.
Because you don't control the foundation.
Exactly. When you just exist on a platform, say a massive cloud provider or some integrated SaaS ecosystem, without actively governing your specific interaction with it, your entire operation rests on infrastructure you don't control. You don't own the underlying API architecture. You don't own the shifting data privacy policies.
And you certainly don't dictate when they deprecate a feature.
Right. Without stewardship, you are entirely at the mercy of platforms that are aggressively optimizing for their own shareholder growth, not for your operational stability. You might think you have a massive footprint, but if a vendor changes their ODUth requirements,
Your automated empire breaks instantly.
instantly, you haven't built a resilient system. You built a massive liability that requires constant reactive patching just to stay upright.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because the core conflict causing all this friction isn't just that platforms change. It's a fundamental mismatch in how things scale, right?
Absolutely.
Technology scales automatically and asynchronously. You can spin up 100 virtual machines or automate 1,000 database queries or deploy microservices in literal seconds. But human oversight,
It doesn't scale automatically.
right, our ability to cognitively process the telemetry coming off those machines does not scale.
It doesn't scale at all without deliberate frameworks. And that gap between the frictionless automatic scaling of machine operations and the fixed biological limits of human attention is exactly where the friction of unmanaged layers takes root.
It's like cognitive overload.
Exactly. When you deploy at scale without a governance framework, it leads directly to cognitive overload. You end up with a sprawling architecture generating thousands of logs, alerts, and performance metrics, with simply too little mental bandwidth to parse what actually matters.
It's the irony of what we call alert blindness or, log fatigue.
Mhm.
Technology was supposed to free up our attention and streamline our operations. Instead, it acts like a rocket engine strapped to a bicycle.
A rocket engine on a bicycle. That's good.
Right, and our brains are the bicycle just desperately trying to keep up. The data flow outpaces our parsing ability. You have dashboards flashing red for minor API latency right next to critical security breaches, and it all just blends into background noise.
And that noise creates profound security fatigue. When your engineering teams, or even you as an individual user, are just bombarded with repeated webhook failures, update prompts, and alert notifications across dozens of disparate unmanaged systems, they stop registering.
You just click acknowledge to clear the screen. Yeah, you just hit allow to clear the queue. And this leads to the ultimate operational blind spot. Systems don't just sit there waiting to be managed. Unmonitored systems drift entirely outside of your awareness. They become shadow IT, and then you're just reacting.
You end up in a situation where you are no longer dictating the behavior of your systems. You are purely reacting to the fires they start.
By the way, if you're finding this breakdown helpful and want to master your own digital systems, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube NCWEBDEV channel right now so you don't miss all the new stuff coming out. Because reacting to systems instead of governing them is exactly the cycle we need to break.
It really is.
So let's look at the cure. We've diagnosed the friction, the cognitive overload, the unsustainability of shadow networks. What does actual mechanical stewardship look like?
Well, let's start by clarifying what stewardship is not. Because the immediate instinct for many technical people when they face this overload is just to nuke the entire stack.
Just delete everything and start over.
Right. But stewardship is not digital minimalism. It is not abandoning complex technology. It is not reverting to analog systems. And it is certainly not driven by a reactionary fear of AI or autonomous agents.
So what does this all mean? It's not about fleeing to an isolated cabin in the woods. It's about drawing an accurate map of the digital city you've built so you can finally govern it.
Exactly. It means implementing intentional structure. It is about achieving operational awareness and enforcing strict governance over your data and access layers. The overarching goal is never less technology. The goal is responsible, resilient technology.
Okay, so how do we practically apply that governance?
To achieve that state, the operational framework relies on the 4 pillars of digital stewardship. And those are visibility, control, consistency, and maintenance. These aren't just buzzwords. They're sequential mechanical steps to locking down an environment.
I love this framework because it really leans into that urban planning analogy. It's not about fleeing the city. It's about finally surveying the land, setting up zoning laws, enforcing building codes, and, funding the sanitation department. You can't govern a city if you don't have a map of the pipes.
That analogy maps perfectly to the first pillar, which is visibility. Visibility is the surveying phase. You must definitively know what exists on your network. You cannot steward a shadow system.
You don't even know it's there.
Right. In practical terms, this means thoroughly mapping your entire tech stack, every database, every API endpoint, every third-party integration, and all your raw data assets. You need a completely unclouded real-time topology of your digital footprint, identifying exactly where your data lives and how it moves.
But simply having a map of the city doesn't make it safe. I mean, just seeing the problem isn't the same as solving it. If you map out your entire server environment, but anyone on the internet can still access your core database, you've achieved absolutely nothing. Which is why visibility merely sets the stage for the second pillar, control. If visibility shows you what exists, control dictates exactly who and what gets to touch it. This is your zoning laws.
Ah, okay.
This means actively governing the principle of least privilege. You must lock down credentials using strict role-based access control, heavily monitor your identity providers, and aggressively manage OAuth integrations. If a diagnostic tool doesn't actively need write access to your repository anymore, you revoke the API token immediately. Control is the active enforcement of boundaries. Then we move into the third pillar, consistency, which, following the analogy, feels like the building codes of our digital city.
Exactly. Consistency is about aligning your infrastructure and your identity graphs. We talked earlier about the friction of disconnected systems, how having varied data schemas across different microservices forces manual reconciliation.
And it constantly breaks automated workflows.
Right. Consistency eliminates that structural fragmentation. It ensures that your identity, your authentication protocols, and your data formatting remain uniform across disparate cloud environments.
So things actually talk to each other properly.
It guarantees that no matter where a computational interaction happens, the integrity of your system's identity holds up without requiring constant manual translation. And finally, pillar 4, maintenance. The sanitation department. It's highly unglamorous, but, well, if the garbage doesn't get picked up, the city shuts down. Maintenance is arguably the most critical pillar for systemic longevity. Maintenance is the active countermeasure to the digital rust we opened the discussion with. It prevents silent degradation by establishing strict, automated rhythms of review.
Like what, specifically?
We are talking about rotating API keys every 90 days, rigorously auditing your active software subscriptions, patching server vulnerabilities, and testing your backup restorations. Without maintenance, your visibility, control, and consistency will all eventually expire. Which of those 4 pillars, visibility, control, consistency, or maintenance, do you struggle with the most? Leave a comment below. Because getting these 4 pillars locked in is no longer just best practice. It is absolute table stakes for survival, especially considering where enterprise architecture is heading.
Right, because the stakes have drastically changed.
They really have. Implementing these 4 pillars is no longer an optional luxury. The margin for error is being drastically compressed by the integration of artificial intelligence and autonomous agents.
Yeah, as our systems grow increasingly automated and capable of executing complex tasks at machine speed, the need for deliberate human governance doesn't decrease, does it?
Not at all. It actually becomes exponentially more critical.
And that feels entirely counterintuitive to the standard narrative.
Right.
Because the promise of AI, the way it's pitched by almost every vendor right now, is essentially let the large language model handle the complexity so your human team doesn't have to. The pitch is that AI is the stewardship.
And that is a profoundly dangerous misconception. Autonomous agents and machine learning models do not replace human judgment. They possess no inherent wisdom.
They're just tools.
Right. What AI actually does is act as a massive operational amplifier. It accelerates and scales whatever structural reality you already have in place.
Oh, wow. So if you have good systems.
If you have rigorously governed systems built on total visibility, strict control, unified consistency, and automated maintenance, then applying AI is going to scale your operational clarity and efficiency to incredible, unprecedented heights.
If you automate a mess, don't you just get a faster mess? How do you even know when a system is actually structured enough to be ready for AI? You know you are ready when you have absolute mastery over the first 2 pillars, visibility and control. If you apply autonomous AI agents to a neglected system riddled with shadow IT and fragmented identity graphs, the AI will simply scale your digital drift. It just makes the problem worse, but faster.
Exactly. You will have machines making rapid-fire, localized decisions based on outdated data schemas, exploiting weak security protocols, and compounding your entropy at a speed humans simply cannot catch. It is a mathematical recipe for cascading failure. AI does not eliminate the need for stewardship. It makes stewardship the only thing keeping your automated systems from tearing themselves apart.
The operational stakes truly couldn't be clearer. I mean, the digital world has evolved. We used to think of the internet and our software stacks as temporary infrastructure, a place we visited, a tool we picked up to do a job and then put down. But that paradigm is dead. It is no longer temporary infrastructure. It is your permanent operational reality.
And operating in reality requires unwavering stewardship. The overarching theme of our analysis today is that managing digital entropy isn't about applying a new layer of productivity hacks.
Right.
We aren't talking about reaching inbox zero or deploying a new dashboard widget. This is about learning how to remain deeply functionally intentional inside increasingly autonomous, highly complex digital environments. Next episode. Website stewardship. Your site is never finished.
If your digital presence becomes permanent operational reality, what state are you leaving it in right now? Are you building a well-maintained digital estate, or are you just accumulating a hazardous digital wasteland? Think about it.